Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, your source for 2A sports. And now, your hosts, coming to you from the Slim Force Studio, Andy and Benny Hill.
Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to 2A sports here in the fantastically warm.
It was fantastic today. It was warm.
And happy Easter to everybody out there, too. It was a wonderful, beautiful Sunday here in Utah, finally, after a while. I'm your host, Andy Hill. I'm here with the coach, Benny Hill, in the Slim Force Studio, sponsored by Security National. As always, we'd like to thank our good friend and Manti Templar, Chris Jorgensen, for being our title sponsor. For any of your mortgage needs, give him a call, 283-3000. Hey, Benny, we got something special on this Easter Sunday today. Why don't you introduce our guest?
Absolutely. We've always talked that we wanted to get more depth and more volume to our podcast other than just covering the scores each week. And I think we have a fantastic guest joining us tonight. In fact, I know we have a fantastic guest. Our good friend, Drew Hill, Gunnison alumnus, straight from Dallas, Texas at this point right now. Just finished off a fantastic career with the TCU Horned Frogs. We've got him on tonight, so we're excited to visit with him. I think he's probably got good weather down there too.
Yeah, pretty nice in Dallas, isn't it, Drew?
Yes, it was wonderful today. Had about 80 degrees. Easter was great, and I'm glad that it's not snowing over there in Utah for once.
Yeah.
Well, as of last week, it was. I think Thursday. Was it Thursday? It dumped five inches or so on Thursday afternoon. Canceled every game possible. Maybe that was Wednesday, but finally you can get outside. Actually, some grass.
It's been a rough high school baseball season here in Utah this year.
Breaking all kinds of records snow-wise over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild this year. In fact, last week we've been talking on the podcast. There is a potential concern, and unless it warmed up real quick, there's teams that wouldn't be able to get all their games played for the season. Because we're midway through April now, and there's teams that were still in single digits of games.
I know there's a couple teams that only played 5 or 6 games so far.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting, crazy year in baseball here.
No doubt. I even heard from my brother, Ty, coaches at Manti, or he did. He coaches at Gunnison now. But he said that some of those northern schools are probably not going to be able to get on their field like this year. There's been a couple coaches that he's been in contact with that even if the snow gets off, it's going to be muddy and probably not going to get a chance to play baseball on their home field.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year for sure. We go from no snow the last couple of years to all this. So anyway,
welcome, Drew.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have you on. There's a lot of stuff we want to cover tonight, and first and foremost, we want to share and cover your journey of baseball, because even to this day, when Andy and I are about and Gunnison, the name Gunnison baseball comes up, people inevitably will ask, "What's Drew Hill doing now?" So your name is within 2A baseball. Your name has always been one of the biggest names out there, just simply because of the duration of time that you played. Everyone knew Drew Hill. That's just the reality of it. And you can be humble, but the reality is everyone knew Drew Hill. And so we wanted to bring you on. And first and foremost, we want to talk about your journey, your baseball journey, where it started. It probably started in 8U baseball or something like that. And then how you went from 8U baseball, from Gunnison High School to a Horned Frog in TCU.
Yes. I mean,
I know that's
this story is really interesting. I tell it a lot, but if I could give you the rundown on kind of how it happened, Gunnison is a small town. I mean, everybody that listens to this podcast knows, but the people that I talk to at TCU or wherever I go play baseball in these big cities, it is shocking to hear that I graduated with 75 kids in my class. There's more cows than there are human beings in the town. And, you know, it's crazy cool for me to look back on, like, growing up in Mayfield, going to school in Gunnison, and ending up graduating and playing my final baseball career at TCU. But how it kind of happened was I grew up playing rec ball in Gunnison, playing t-ball and coach pitch, and I loved playing. I loved playing like so much so that I would beg my mom and my dad and my grandpa and grandma like to find ways for me to play that were not in rec, because I knew baseball was going on in the summer. I knew baseball was going on in the fall. I knew there was academies in St. George and in Salt Lake that let people play in the winter time as well. And I would ask, but nobody really knew kind of what or how to go about doing that. And so I kind of took matters into my own hands as an 8-year-old or 9-year-old on the internet, and I just researched RMSB. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain School of Baseball. And I found out on their website that they would post teams throughout the state that were looking for a single player to kind of fill a roster spot. And I got on there. I saw that there was this team called the Cedar City Fusion that was looking for a player. And I ended up convincing my mom and dad and my grandpa and grandma and my great grandma Glade, if you can remember her at the time.
Oh, yeah.
They all piled in. We all piled in the van, and we went down there for this tryout for the Cedar City Fusion. And the whole time they were kind of just, Drew, no matter what happens, it's okay. No matter what happens, if you make it, if you don't make it, it's just cool that we got to drive out of Gunnison and play baseball somewhere else. And I ended up going down there, and I ended up being the best player on that team and had some. They offered me that roster spot before we even left the tryout while other kids were still trying out. And so that's kind of where my first start in accelerated baseball began. And that time with the Cedar City Fusion lasted about 2 weeks. And I got another team that I played against asked me to come hop on their team. Actually, it was they were called the St. George Thunder. We played them at a tournament in St. George. And I hopped on that St. George Thunder team, and I played one tournament with them. And on that team was Chris MacArthur's boy, Mark MacArthur. Okay. So you guys
know him well, yes.
Yes, you guys know Chris and Mark. Mark graduated from Gunnison. And I played some college or high school baseball with Mark, but he was on my second ever accelerated baseball team. And played one tournament with them, and then was asked to go play with this team called the St. George Rebels. And that team kind of is what got me started. The coach for that team, his name was Delin Corey. He coached at Southern Utah University, played some minor league baseball. His son right now is playing minor league for the Giants. He got drafted in the 3rd round out of Lone Peak, out of high school. And, I was surrounded by really good players at that point. And I literally bounced between 20 plus accelerated baseball teams from my 9-year-old, self through graduating high school.
Can I tell you a funny story, Drew?
Yeah.
At one point, I don't know if you remember this or not, but you gave Jackson one of your Fusion jerseys. It was a gray pinstriped, had Hill on the back, Fusion in the baseball script on the front jersey.
I do. And I vaguely remember that now that you bring that up. Wow. Do you still have that?
I think it's still kicking around, and I'm going to have to see if I can find it. Once you said Fusion and the light bulb just went on, I think that jersey's around here somewhere.
That was my very first team I ever played for.
Yeah, that is here in our house somewhere.
That is
I know I wouldn't have Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find it. Anyway, sorry to carry on, though.
All right. Well, and then I ended up getting into high school and doing all sorts of showcases and tryouts, for colleges, and tons of tournaments and leagues, playing in northern Utah, southern Utah, all over. And I ended up having 2 offers out of high school to go play college baseball. The one was actually not even an offer. they didn't ever talk money. They said they were going to extend an offer, but never really did. And that was Utah Tech. It was Dixie at the time. The other one was Utah Valley. And interestingly enough, both of those schools were going to offer me or did offer me without ever seeing me play, which was a really crazy story. The only reason Utah Valley ended up showing me an offer was because at a tryout, one of the recruiters were friends with the recruiter at Utah Valley. He ended up saying, "Hey, this kid from Gunnison, Utah, throwing 92, and he's not going JUCO, and he's at a JUCO or a showcase." And so they sent that thing over to Utah Valley. They offered me, and I thought that was going to be the only offer I got, and so I ended up taking it. And I go to Utah Valley, and it was a great experience. I was closing as a freshman. I ended up closing games at Mississippi State and USC and Pacific University. And because of those successes, I ended up starting a game against the defending national champions, the Arizona Wildcats, and ended up having some success. I went 6 innings, gave up 2 hits and 1 run. We ended up losing the game. The bullpen gave up the game at the end, but I was kind of shown that I could hang out with the big boys. I was really nervous about pitching against the defending national champions and pitching against 2A schools just 7 months prior to that.
Isn't that wild?
Yes.
That's absolutely nuts.
Yes. And
that's one thing.
Say that. What were you going to say?
We're going to get into that a little bit about the differences between high school and college, but carry on with your journey here and we'll get to that.
Okay. The one little quick cool story that I would say just about that Arizona game was I remember it was supposed to be played at Utah Valley, but it was rainy. And so we ended up getting rained out and we couldn't play at Orem, but BYU was gone and they have that turf field over there. And they ended up letting us play Arizona on their field that day. And I remember sitting in my dorm at Utah Valley just thinking what I just told you, that I was pitching against Grand just 7 months prior to that, and North Sevier and Manti. Less than a year, I was pitching against teams that didn't even have enough players to cut players. And now I'm playing against the defending national champions. And it was such a surreal experience. And I just said, I got nothing to lose. There is absolutely nothing that I can lose by going and doing this. And so I kind of used that as fuel to know that I could go out there and fail and nothing would happen. But if I go out there and have tremendous success, then that's even cooler experience. And so I wasn't afraid. I used that I didn't use that fear in a negative way by any means and ended up having success. But I transferred to a junior college just after Utah Valley called South Mountain Community College. And
that's in Phoenix area?
Yeah, I was literally living on Arizona State's campus at the time, right in Tempe. And that's where I really got to go through the recruiting process for the first time, because I was throwing low 90s in high school and didn't have many college offers or even anybody looking at me. But when I went down to South Mountain, I ended up touching 97. I was sitting 94, 95 pretty consistently, and had offers from South Carolina, TCU, Texas, Arizona State, USC, Oregon State, Oregon, a lot of different colleges that never would have known me if I didn't take that jump down to South Mountain. And ended up loving the visit that I took to TCU and the coaches, and ended up choosing TCU and played 3 years. My first year there at TCU was COVID. So we played 15 games and got shut down. And that's why I ended up playing 2 extra years at TCU and just finished up.
I've always told people, Drew, then when you started to make that jump from high school to college, people would ask, is Drew going to make it? Can Drew do this? And I honestly tell you this, I've told people, and I have no hesitation in saying this, Drew Hill, I would say Drew Hill is the most mentally tough, the biggest badass competitor I've ever been around. And I honestly, I say that in all sincerity. If anybody's going to be successful, this kid will be, just because of what he has in his mental makeup. And to what you've just said, I mean, that's when you go from pitching against North Severe, Grand, 2A baseball, and then pitching against national champions. If anybody could have done it, it was you.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I have always,
and I'm not just saying that to blow smoke at you because you're on the podcast here either, bud. I truly, honestly believe that.
I mean, I thank you so much, because that's what I really do pride myself on, is my mentality. Like when I was in high school, I remember being, at school, I would get home and I was watching motivational videos. I was watching literally like workouts to do at home, because at the time, Neil's really wasn't a thing. And I was like just working out at my house and looking up like post game, like throwing routines, and just doing all kinds of things, not because anybody asked me to, but because like I was sincerely interested and wanted to bad. And I didn't go play accelerated baseball because my mom and dad wanted me to go do it. Like I wanted to really bad. And I had a comfortable scholarship at Utah Valley, which I could have just sat there and, got a degree and lived close to home and all that stuff. But I just told myself that I'm not going to spend all that money and time that my parents took me around the country doing baseball and all this money they spent to not play to what I was, my potential at Utah Valley. And so being able to push the chips in the middle of the table and go and try and earn another scholarship at JUCO, because at the time the transfer portal was not a thing. And so I was like, I have to go perform or I am done playing baseball. And so I went to South Mountain on a mission to just get a new scholarship, and things ended up working out.
So at the time, prior to the transfer portal, you could transfer to a JC and play immediately, as opposed to going university where you'd have to sit a year.
Yeah, at the time, you transfer to a D1, you lose a year of eligibility, and I would have lost my whole sophomore year.
Cool. Hey, one of the questions that you've touched on this just briefly, but what is the recruiting process like if you're from a small rural school like Gunnison? Kids always want to go play at the next level, and I remember when my son was playing with Jansen at the time, and we'd be out there and the scouts are showing up at the games and everybody's all excited. But what is that recruiting process really like as you're going through your high school season?
I mean, everybody's recruiting experience is different. I was gone, so I didn't get to see Jansen's. I know what Jansen's was like when he was transferring from BYU. But, for me, I would just say that the whole experience is different for everybody. And it's different right now, more different right now than it's ever been. I think the most important thing, like getting out of playing accelerated baseball, can still do that, but you got to make a presence on social media. There's so many coaches that only recruit on social media because they can see players in New York, they can see players in California, they can see players in Utah all at the same time without having to take flights there.
That's a good point.
That's interesting.
And so is the showcase world still a big thing?
Yeah, showcase world is a thing. I wouldn't say, I would use that. Like, have you heard of PBR?
Yeah.
So PBR actually is a good thing, and the Utah PBR does a really good job. of just showcasing Utah players. Sometimes you have to pay to go to these PBR events. Sometimes they're free. Sometimes they're through invitation. But those things are like, they're a necessity if you're going to want to go play college baseball, I would say, because it lets you compete against the best of the best in Utah, because that's where all the best players are going, because they want to get ranked. And that's really the only thing that is ranking high school players in Utah is PBR. There's like a number 1 overall player in Utah. There's number 2 all the way down to, I don't know if it's 25 or what, but you can get ranked. And that's where colleges look, is, who's ranked on the PBR. PBR also takes video of you, hitting and pitching, all these things. It's a very good recruiting tool.
It's interesting. It's fascinating, actually.
Is that Jeff Schulson?
Jeff Schulson, yeah, from Hurricane. He does a great job. He is really motivated. I talked to him too, because of just how little exposure Utah players get because of it. It's a cold weather state. They can't play baseball all year round. And, historically, baseball hasn't been as big in Utah as it is in California or Texas or Florida or Georgia. And so he's really motivated to get Utah players out there. And that's, I think, why so many really good Utah players now aren't going to Utah or BYU or Utah Tech. They're going to LSU and TCU and Oklahoma State, because now their names are getting out there.
Fascinating. So let me ask you this question. I know you had a fantastic high school season, 2A MVP your senior year, won a state championship for the Bulldogs,
yes.
GV. But aside from that, let's say you have a kid with your talent, has a fantastic high school season, gets on the big stage. Obviously, when you start getting into state championships, you get a little bit more press out there. If you didn't go outside of the high school realm and didn't play in the accelerated arena and these PBR showcases, are you still getting seen, or are you really getting left behind?
Yeah, you would be left behind for sure. And that's like, I tell Tage, I tell anybody I talk to, I would not have ever played college baseball if I didn't go to that one like showcase where this random JUCO guy messaged another D1 guy who ended up giving me a D1 offer. I was throwing, like I said, 92. I had almost 400 strikeouts in my high school career, won a state championship, did all these things, no hitters, but I was lucky to have gotten one college offer just because of where I lived and the amount of exposure that Utah gets, but let alone rural Utah.
That's wild.
I'm fascinated by this discussion, because I remember how good you were, and for us, it was like, yeah, of course we knew Drew. We know what he did. We watch him. Your hometown success, and people in our arena, obviously in the 2A, the smaller schools, they knew you,
Mm-hmm.
and so to hear you say that just kind of boggles my mind, because I know there must be obviously a lot of kids out there who just aren't getting the opportunity because they're not playing the game, but they don't understand the process.
Yes. And they, like myself, at the time, didn't have any connections in the baseball world. They didn't have connections to college coaches directly. They didn't have connections to these PBR leaders and the people who run the academies in Salt Lake and St. George. And just somebody who's well-versed in the baseball community to help young players in rural Utah who have the ability to get to where they need to be. And so, like, that's what I've loved being able to do is, in the summers when I was playing, I'd come back to Gunnison and I would throw camps. And I just wanted kids to play baseball. And the people that were really good or wanted, to pursue something in the future with baseball can come up. Their parents can talk to me. They can ask questions. They can get my number. And I just am really motivated for small town kids to get the chance that I honestly didn't have, but I just had to take a really tough route to get there.
What we'll do, Drew, on our website and stuff, I'm going to gather some information from you, off air, whether it be some the contacts to PBR, whatever. We'll talk and we'll get some information out to our audience, things that will be helpful for them. Let's bounce into the difference between high school and college.
Yeah. I mean,
you leave the confines of Gunnison High School, the fine facility out here, and you bounce into college baseball. What is the difference?
First off, just the talent that you're surrounded by. You're surrounded by anywhere between 45 and 50 other players that are just as good or better than you are, and you have to compete for a spot. And there's only 9 people that can play on a baseball field at one time, and only one pitcher. And so, for me, I needed to separate myself and not let my Uncle Blair would always tell me, hey, dude, you don't want to be a big fish in a small pond. You want to be a big fish in a big pond. And I kind of took what he told me, into the college realm. I was the big fish in the small pond in Gunnison, but I did not want to get lost in the big pond when I went to college. And I think just, recognizing that I was surrounded by really good players all the time, I needed to do things a little bit different. But other than just being surrounded by a lot of talent, the time that college baseball takes is insane. You're doing weights from 6 to 8 in the morning. You got class, until about 1 o'clock. And then at 1:30, you're practicing till 5 or 5:30. And then you go home and do your homework and do the same thing the next day, unless you have a game. And then, you just show up. Like if we had a 6:30 game at TCU, we were showing up to the field at 2 o'clock. And so it's a lot of time that baseball takes. And I would say those are 2 very big differences that I noticed.
A couple of questions I had. What are the coaches like? Obviously in high school, coaches have a different role and they can only do so much. What are college coaches like?
Yeah. All of the coaches I had were significantly different from one another. My first college coach at Utah Valley, he was more of laid back, more of somebody who didn't talk a whole lot to the players. He just was in the dugout calling pitches and giving signs during the games. Other than that, you didn't really hear from him, and that was a little different from me, coming from Gunnison, having Jared as my coach, talking to him all the time, and having a lot of communication with all my coaches, but having very little as a freshman. That was a little different. And then at junior college, the coaches were a lot the same. They were laid back, but they were very much more involved because their whole job is to get players out of their school and into other D1 programs. So they're wanting to have a lot of conversation with you, seeing what you want to what you're looking for in your next place, how they can help you, and also at the same time holding you to a high standard and coaching you so that they can develop you. So I really liked my junior college experience. And
so tell us a little.
Yeah.
Carry on. Go ahead, Drew. Carry on.
Okay. Well, just at TCU, that Coach Jim Schlossnagel, that guy he's a different beast, but in a good way. He literally has the presence of Darth Vader when you're in the stadium walking by him. It's like you can hear the Imperial March if you're walking down the same hallway.
That's awesome.
But it's just because I think he's built such a cool thing for himself. He's taken Tulane to Omaha. He's taken TCU 3 times to Omaha. He's taken Texas A&M to Omaha. He hasn't won a national championship, but this guy is on the Mount Rushmore of college coaching, if there was a Mount Rushmore of college coaching. And so He holds things to a really high standard, runs a tight ship, and the vibe at TCU was very much so like you're going to buy into his program or you're going to get out.
What is the Imperial Stormtroopers? That's awesome. What I want to talk to you about junior college baseball here for a second. So you went to UVU for your freshman year, played at UVU, and you made the decision to go to JC.
Yeah.
Explain what the decision, why go JC at that point, and what's the benefit of kids going to JC right out of high school now?
Yeah. I mean, the benefit for me was I didn't want to lose a year of eligibility. The transfer portal was not a thing, so I had to go junior college. And the benefit for players now to go junior college is I say if you don't have an offer from your dream school out of high school, go to a junior college that has a high reputation of developing players and go on a mission to get that dream school's offer. I would, I'm biased because Texas has good college or junior college teams. Florida has good junior college teams, but I think the Arizona junior college, the whole thing they got going on down there with junior colleges is the best in the nation. And I say that because Arizona is right in your backyard, which I really like their baseball program. Arizona State is in your backyard, and all of those MLB scouts with spring training are in your backyard, and they're all well connected. And so you got and all the colleges, they know where the good baseball is, and good baseball is in Arizona. And so I really like the Arizona junior college type of thing. And I would say if you don't have your dream school out of high school, look really significantly into going junior college.
So as a follow up to that, how do you know, or how do a player know, how does a player know what's a good fit for them? Because I know there's always the big name. You know, every kid who's looks out there and watches the College World Series, they want to go to South Carolina or Texas or TCU or any of these big schools. But how would you teach a kid to say, hey, this is what you need to look for that fits you right?
I would say get to know the coaches, because if they're recruiting you, you're going to have a chance to basically interview them as well. They want you. So taking the time to get to know the coaches and see if they kind of align with your values as a person, see if you're going to be able to get along with them for 4 years. And also look at, myself, I was a pitcher. So if I'm getting recruited by TCU out of high school, I'm looking at how many older players are pitching at TCU right now that are going to be either drafted or graduating by the time I'm there, to see, kind of what spots open up. Or if they're really young and a lot of them are playing, then it's going to be a lot harder to just step in right away. Taking some of those things into consideration. Also knowing that like TCU was historically a pitching school. Lots of really great pitchers from TCU. And so that was attractive as a pitcher. Whereas, if you go to Texas Tech or Texas, that's a big time hitter's ballpark that they play in. The baseball flies out of there. So if you're an infielder or an outfielder or a catcher and you've got some pop, go to places where you're going to see some home runs. Not so much TCU, who's got a big ballpark and things like that.
Interesting. Yeah, very good. Transfer portal. How's the transfer portal going to affect college baseball?
So college baseball is just becoming older. Like it's hard to come out of high school and go and play right away, but it happens. It happens. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but with COVID and with the transfer portal, the coaches are wanting to get players that are going to play right away. And so whether that's getting junior college transfers that have already had a year or two of college baseball experience, or other D1 guys that are just not liking it where they are, They want guys that are going to have an immediate impact. And I came to know this at TCU, that basically just because you're on a fall roster at a college baseball program doesn't mean you are like a full-time player there. Fall rosters are basically like tryouts. If you don't do well in the fall, you could be cut for the spring. And that carries year to year. So your scholarship that you sign is never guaranteed every year.
That's interesting. Talk to us for a minute about Big 12 baseball.
All right. TCU was, while I was at TCU, I ended up winning the Big 12 twice. We got canceled, like I said, because of COVID my first year, so we didn't get to play in the tournament that year. But those 2 years prior or after that, we were able to win Big 12 championships. You're playing in front of big crowds every night. So, if you compare it to like the Pac-12 with USC or UCLA or Utah, the West Coast schools don't kind of get the fan attendance that the Big 12 does. And so it's cool to play in front of big crowds that really care about college baseball. They get really passionate about it. And playing against some of the best competition that the country has to offer every single night. And so I thought that was a super fun experience.
I'll be honest with you. Last night when I was watching the TCU game, it was at TCU's park. I had to turn the volume down because the crowd was so loud.
Yes. They care, dude. The TCU Horned Frog faithful, they care. They only have, I don't know if you know this, but TCU only has 10,000. They capped the student population at 10,000. And so there's never more than 10,000 students there. And so a lot of the fans are just local fans. They just love sports. You don't have like this big, massive student section like the 12th man at Texas A&M or like Texas or Texas Tech that have like 60,000 students. So the fact that we can fill up our stadium with usually 5,000 a night, at least, whenever, you get up to like 20,000, but you can count on 5,000 being there.
20,000 at a baseball game?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wild.
And it's not just so at TCU, you have the stands and there's 2 decks, and then you have a big old berm of grass on the right side. And then there's seating in the right field, like all over the right field and down the left field line. So like you can fit a lot of people in there. And we hosted regionals, and that's when things get real busy there.
So what's it like coming out on the mound in front of one of those big crowds?
Oh man, let's see. It's I'll tell you the funnest experience I ever had, and it wasn't even at TCU. It was at Utah Valley. This was before I started against Arizona. We flew over to Mississippi State, and they were ranked like 10 at the time. And we opened up on a Friday. It was a close game. It was like 1-1 the whole game. We went into extra innings. Into the 11th inning, it was still tied 1-1, and we scored a run in the top of the 11th. And we were up 2-1 in Starkville, Mississippi, and they had 13,000 people at this game against Utah Valley. And they were just updating their stadium, and so they could have had more, but they were updating the stadium so the top level wasn't even accessible. And I remember going down, warming up in the bullpen, and dude, this is the SEC country at Mississippi State. And so there's drunk people throwing food down there at you, people wanting to offer you beer as you're getting ready on the mound and heckling you like crazy. These people were pulling up my old like Twitter tweets and Instagram, and they were reading them off to me. And they were like looking at like my old like girlfriend at the time and like just trying anything they could to get in my head. And I was just soaking it all in because it was an experience I've never had before. I wasn't letting it get like me nervous because I was just like, this is absolutely insane. And
It was probably firing you up.
yes, it was so fun. And I jogged out there and ended up striking out this guy to win the game. I got the 3 outs. We closed the game as a freshman at Mississippi State in front of 13,000. And after the game, all those people that are heckling you, they're DMing you back on Instagram saying, "Nice job." We were just like screwing around with you and all this stuff. That's the coolest, that's the coolest experience I've ever had that I can remember.
That is awesome.
Do you have so when you transferred from South Mountain, were you a starter at South Mountain?
Yeah, I started only at South Mountain.
So they went to TCU. Did you start games there?
I started games in the beginning, actually. So you heard of Globe Life Ballpark now, where the Texas Rangers play? I can't remember what the stadium was called before they changed it to Globe Life, but right across the stadium in the Rangers' old ballpark, I started the very last baseball games that ever be played there. They changed it into an AFL or XFL football stadium now. But the very last baseball game I played, or that was played there, I started it for TCU against the Texas Rangers minor league prospect team. And I started that game. I started a game early on at TCU, but was moved I did middle relief. And, I didn't make the starting cut, but I still was a big player in the bullpen. My first year at TCU, I had the most appearances because of just the amount of times I got out of the bullpen. The second year, I was third on the team in most appearances. And then my final year, I missed the first 30 games of our season because of a back injury, but ended up playing. And so I got my fair share at TCU, got my pitches out there, but yeah, it was good.
Did you get a song, a walkout song?
Yeah, it's my first year. It was "Kids" by One Republic. My second
Love
year,
it.
My second year, it was, my second year it was a Ozzy Osbourne song. Let me see. What
You can go heavy on us.
Ozzy. It was "No More Tears" by Ozzy Osbourne.
Nice.
And then my last year at TCU, it was "Call Me" by Blondie.
Nice.
Yeah.
So is that I have to ask you this. Is that a big deal, your song selection?
It is. I mean, people look forward to it every year, and that's the talk of the clubhouse for about a week until people submit their songs. But people like their walkout songs.
Is there a pecking order if two guys want the same song that somebody gets seniority?
The senior would always get it, but I'd never seen that happen.
It's interesting. I think it's a fascinating thing. I'm always intrigued by culture too. What's the culture like being a starter versus coming out of the bullpen? Because you hear stories all the time, especially you see it in the college ranks and in the big league ranks where the guys down the bullpen, they're always got some shenanigans going on.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the two, and what's that like being down in the bullpen?
In the bullpen, you're kind of left alone to fend for yourself, and that's where it's just known that the dogs are in the bullpen. The starters are, their butt gets wiped by the starting or by the pitching coach, and they're all trying to just make sure they're feeling good, and they're trying to make sure that they're taken care of. But the dogs that come in and pitch the big hefty innings when things matter, they're in the bullpen, and that's kind of where I resided. Like I said, most of the time at TCU. And so if you're struggling, you got to figure out how to stop struggling and get back on track, because you're not going to be, coached from the coaches. They're talking to the starting pitchers, and there's that. But like you said, we also had a good time when we were in the bullpen while the games were going on. We're dancing around for home runs and having a good time. I remember on Friday nights, we would have like a buffet where everybody in the bullpen would bring their favorite candy, and we would just snack on candy in the bullpen on Friday night buffet time.
That's awesome.
A couple things I want to ask you about here in this same topic here is competing for time or competing for innings. Say you mentioned if you're struggling on the mound, at what level do coaches go put their arm around you, or do they just say, "Hey man, you're a big boy, figure it out, or we're going to find somebody else"?
Yeah. You're always competing for playing time. Like always. You're going to have at least 2 bullpens a week in the fall, and that's where you're really getting evaluated. From especially if you're just a freshman incoming. Like you're getting evaluated every week by those coaches that are looking at your bullpens. And you're getting coached up real good, but there's a point that it comes to where, they've done all they can and they just kind of move on to the next guy. And, you've got to either like do something yourself, whether that's staying after and doing some extra work that you didn't know about or that you found out talking to other players. Like you got to figure out how to not sink if that is the case. I remember, particularly with my time at TCU, the amount of time you have with coaches is very short because they have, as a pitcher, they had 17 other guys that could do your job just as good as you or better. And so if they had to spend a ton of time with you, they weren't going to do that. They were just going to give it to the next guy, and hopefully that guy wanted the ball more than you.
Is there anything to the comment of based upon? Is there a level of scholarship or commitment that a school or a team has to a particular player over another player that would give them more chances?
Yeah, and the truth is, the bigger scholarships do go to pitchers. I do know that, like, the money in college baseball right now, I hope that it changes and they get full rides for everybody. But a lot of the money does go to pitchers, and they don't get full rides because there's 11.7 scholarships they have to give out to 40 players. And so even if you're
how many
11.7 scholarships. There's not even 12 full scholarships that is funded to baseball programs to give out to their entire roster. So they have to share 11.7 scholarships between 40 guys.
And that's one thing we wanted to talk about. We should have got into this earlier, but we can hit it now. So when someone says they have a scholarship to play at a particular school, or I received an offer, what does that mean?
Yeah. If they say that they received an offer, then that just means like they were, given some money to play at that school. But there's also talk, you always hear like, yeah, I'm committed to this school. And like, you never really know what that means because a verbal commitment could be like, that. And verbal commitments mean literally nothing until you sign. And so it just kind of depends. If you're offered, then you have seen some money. And, if you say you're signed, then you're obviously signed. And if you're committed, you don't really know like what that means, because you could say like I'm committed to BYU, but then all of a sudden UVU comes in and like gives you an offer and you take that, or BYU takes that away.
So there's not a full scholarship in baseball.
No, you don't get full ride scholarships in baseball. The way you get full ride scholarships in baseball is by having academic money on top of your baseball money.
So they're going to give you a portion of, there's a percentage of a scholarship they're going to give to Drew Hill. Then it's your responsibility then, hopefully academically, you can go qualify for other money.
Yeah, so it's really important to go and like get good grades and get a good ACT score, because the higher your ACT score, the more money you get academically, and the better grades you get, the more money you get academically. And so, you tack that on to your baseball scholarship. That's when you start to get a full ride scholarship. But and this is all different too, because you guys know much about NIL?
A little bit, just on the surface that you hear, yes, but not the details.
Like, I mean, you could, like, I was out before this became really a huge thing. This is the first year it's kind of a huge thing, but you can make a lot of money with NIL deals, and there's really no cap to that. So there's some weird little things that college coaches can do with like business connections they have, and having those businesses like sponsor players and give you a bunch of money there, which could like act as a scholarship. But like, there's a lot of different ways with NIL you can get around scholarships.
Are you familiar at the college level? Are boosters or sponsors, are they actually courting players with money to come to their school?
Yes. At TCU, there's this thing called the Block T Club, and I know it was like a thing my last year at TCU. So I was there while it first started, but they gave it to younger players because they were going to be there for a lot longer. And so Braden Taylor, I don't know if you heard of him. He's from Utah, went and played at Copper Hills. Braden Taylor was in the Block T Club while I was at TCU as well. And I remember him telling me that if you just go to like one of these Block T meetings, which is just like two guys from the baseball team and like so many guys from the basketball team and football team and volleyball and golf are a part of this thing, and you get like a certain amount of money by just going to these meetings. And so Braden, I don't know if it's different for other like sport teams, but like Braden would get like $2,000 just to go to these meetings.
Wild. I guess the whole NIL thing, that's going to change the whole landscape of college athletics with that amount of money that people can offer.
Yeah. I mean, there's college players that are making more money in college now than they would if they were to sign a professional contract. But
isn't that nuts?
But it's not necessarily in baseball yet. It's all the big time football guys, big time basketball guys. Baseball, not so much. Like there's some heavy hitters, like a couple guys like at LSU. There's some like standout guys, but the majority of like all that money is football and basketball.
That's interesting.
So let's talk now. What's the if you don't have anything else, Andy, to go on that, what's the MLB draft process like?
Dude, yeah, that
is that wild to even think about?
No, yeah, that was crazy. I got my first taste of that while I was at South Mountain, and I go down there. I ended up, transferring just because I needed another college scholarship. And when I got all of the interest I had from all these colleges, I also had a lot of interest from MLB scouts. I remember there was a lot of games where I had scouts from every MLB organization at some games, just watching, doing some radar gun, taking notes. And like it gets in your head. And so I had to get an advisor, and that advisor would kind of talk to those MLB scouts for you so that you don't have to do that. You don't have to like worry about them. But like I was young and immature, and so like I still let some of that stuff get to my head. And I had a really great fall. That's when I had all these college like people watching, all these MLB people watching. I was throwing 97. And then I got to the spring, and I had a good spring, but it wasn't a great spring. Like it wasn't my fall. I feel like my fall at South Mountain was a lot better than my spring. And so my draft stuff kind of fell a little bit. And the offers I did end up getting just weren't enough to take and not go get a college degree. And so I went to TCU, and the first year at TCU, I didn't have to deal with any draft stuff because it was COVID. And they did have a little draft. It was like the top 5 rounds. And so there was like 100 or so players that got drafted, but like I wasn't one of the top 100 players. And so I didn't have to mess around with any draft stuff that year. And then the next year, I ended up getting, some offers again. I had a deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates in like the 12th round. They said, "Are you going to accept this if we take you?" And I said, "Yes." And it just didn't happen. And so like, there's so many things like with the MLB draft that is up and down. And the thing with me, just it never really ended up working out. And I had some free agent deals after the draft where it's like, we'll pay you like $20,000 to come and give it a shot. We still think you're good enough, but we didn't draft you. Like we just, here's a free agent opportunity. And I was still one semester away from my degree. So I said no to that, went back to TCU for my last year and just played that out and graduated. And I was 23 at the time. And the older you get in the MLB draft world, the less, attractive you are. So I took the route into coaching instead of playing professionally.
That's wild to think. The other thing I've thought about it is it a big distraction at the college level that the draft is going on during the season?
Yeah, and I think they ended up moving the draft a little bit later, so that now I think
Have they?
is like a week or so after the the college baseball season ends. But you're still like the teams that are playing in Omaha are still
Yeah, that's what.
they're still kind of affected, and so that does play a part in some things. At least it did for me. I wish I was a little bit more mature. It's not like I was like dinking around or anything. I was just more focused on that because it was like super cool to me. And I didn't really know like how to like just focus on the task at hand as well as I wish I did. And so that's like, if I did have one regret, like that would be that one regret I had.
Well, in all fairness to you, I mean, that is a huge mental mountain to climb over, knowing you're from Mayfield, Utah, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are calling you on the phone or whoever it is,
Yes.
and you're thinking about, hey, I have the potential to play in Major League Baseball. I mean, how could that not affect you mentally? And that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and I'll give you one other story just to like kind of show you how it was like I got so like into the MLB stuff. Like, I had meetings with these MLB scouts at least like 3 or 4 times a week, just wanting to like meet at like coffee shops before school or after school or like before a practice. And like, I should not have taken all of these meetings. I didn't need to, but I didn't know that. And so like all these meetings and like all these distractions of like talking to people when I knew I didn't know I didn't need to. They could like contact me other ways or like, search for other times. But like if, a Mayfield guy, I had these people asking me to like go and get a coffee or like, have a bite and then discuss my professional baseball endeavors. Like I was going to say yes. And so like it got to the point where even my guy, like when I committed in the fall, in the spring, I was having all these meetings. The coaches at TCU heard that I was like, having all of these meetings, and Coach Sarlos flew from Texas to Arizona to meet with me twice about not taking any draft, and coming to school. And I was still, even after those 2 meetings, like, I was like, still like I wanted to do the professional stuff. And Sarlos like kind of heard that, and Schlossnagel like kind of heard that stuff still floating around. And my season was done at South Mountain, so I was back in Utah. But I got a call from Schlossnagel, who was about to fly to Arkansas for like the regionals. So they were still playing in June, but I was done and I was back in Utah. And he's like, "I'm flying to Salt Lake and we got to go meet before." So he flew to Salt Lake, met with me and my mom and dad at a Buffalo Wild Wings, and gave me this like, he brought like 3 pamphlets of things and documents on why it's so important for, me to go to school instead of going into professional baseball so young. and flew from our meeting to Arkansas to coach the regional game. And so, like,
Wild.
yes, that's just like that's how crazy the MLB draft kind of stuff goes. And I just wasn't super prepared on how to handle it.
Yeah, who would be, Drew? I mean, that's
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You've seen in your journey, you've been around a lot of coaches and a lot of players. What players or coaches have had a huge or the biggest impact upon you during your journey?
I would say, first off, my grandpa Johnny and my dad, because I never had a pitching coach until I literally got to TCU. I didn't pay for any pitching coach. I didn't go to any academy and do get pitching lessons. My grandpa and my dad let me pitch to them in the backyard. They would hit me ground balls. I would hit wiffle balls and things like that. And so those two are probably the biggest mentors, just getting me excited about playing baseball. And then, in high school, my uncle Jared was keeping me excited and giving me opportunities to play and do all these things. So that was really cool. But in college, the connections and the relationships I made at TCU were by far the best mentors I've had. So Jim Schlossnagel has given me 2 or 3 letters of recommendation for things since I've graduated. Brian Kane, who was our sports psychologist and literally the mental performance coach for almost every NCAA athletic department, for all of their sporting teams, and Coach Sarlos, who was my pitching coach there, Zach Dakin, who was my strength coach there. I stay in contact with those guys a lot, and so those guys are huge mentors. And because of the connections I made with them, that's why I was able to get into college coaching so quickly. And I feel like I could, moving forward, now that I have stepped out of college coaching just for a little bit.
We're going to come back to that in just a second. So hold that thought on your future in baseball. What impactful lessons have you learned, specifically you personally, along your baseball journey?
The biggest one I would say is to take the risk, to challenge yourself as far as you can go. As myself coming from a rural community, and a lot of your listeners are from small town Utah, it can get in your head to think oh, I only play small town baseball. I only play baseball against 2A schools. I only play rec ball. So I can't go and play accelerated baseball or go to these PBR showcases or go to these academy showcases because I'm not good enough. You would be surprised how you do stack up, even though you are from a small town. And, you may end up being, the black sheep. You may end up being the small town kid that nobody's heard of, that it kind of takes over. And that's a really cool feeling. And so I would just say, and leading into college, taking the risk to leave a scholarship that I had at Utah Valley to pursue something that I saw that was a bit bigger than myself. So take risks, challenge yourself, put yourself out of your comfort zone, play against players that you don't think that you're as good as, because that's where you're going to ultimately grow. If you're going to play just because you're comfortable, then you're going to end up never reaching your potential. So throw yourself out of your comfort zone as much as you can.
Very nice.
That's really good. No, this has been fun. I mean, from the outside, obviously we followed your journey all the way along, but it's been fun to see the intimate details about this. And maybe one question I'd ask you, was there ever a point where you said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore?
Yeah.
And what and if you did, what got you to keep going on?
So when I found out, that it was kind of a dog eat dog world, like, and I've always kind of been a homebody. And so going to Utah Valley was a little bit weird because I was, not in Gunnison. And then moving to Phoenix, I got a little bit farther away. And then moving to Texas, I got a little bit farther away. And so knowing that I'm kind of out here where nobody, I don't have any relatives that are close to me. And baseball is really hard, and school at this private school is really hard. I just knew that instead of turning away from all of that adversity or all of those things that were, going against me, really weren't going against me. It was just like a challenge. It's all a perspective. And I looked at that as, challenges to get better. And so I think that's something that a lot of young kids, get afraid of. And I hope that they can somehow muster up the courage to not be afraid of, failure.
Very good. So now you're done at TCU. You're all finished now, all graduated, all done.
Yeah.
All finished. What are your future plans?
So it was weird. I played my last game at Texas A&M in a regional for TCU. The time between my last game playing and my first game coaching was less than 72 hours. I got on the bus from College Station. We got back to Fort Worth. I had my exit meeting with my coach that day. I packed up all my stuff that day and headed back to Utah, and was back in Utah the following day. And then the day after that, it was kind of a chill day at home, seeing everybody. And then the next day after that, I drove up to Salt Lake City, and I began as the pitching coach for the Marshall Gates Foundation, Marshalls. I don't know if you've heard about them, but I ended up coaching them for 80 games throughout the summer. From June 6th to August 6th, we played 80 games in 60 days.
I'll bet that was a wild ride.
It was insane. We played all those games at Kearns High School, and we traveled to Oceanside, California, and played. We went up to Oregon and played, and that was a blast. I mean, on the pitching staff that I was responsible for, we had 20 big-time college recruits that were signed to and are now on the campuses of Stanford, and TCU, USC, Arizona State, Minnesota, Grand Canyon, big-time schools, Cal. And so I was responsible for them for 80 games, and not just the way they pitched, but how they managed their arm care after they pitched, their strength and conditioning, and their mental performance.
That's cool. How fun was that to be back where you won a state championship to be able to coach?
That was my first time back since that game, and it was crazy. It was so surreal. The amount of time that passed in between all the things that had passed from my last meeting there to the first time I was back as a coach was insane. I mean, I did all those things that we just got done talking about in the middle of those experiences.
Wow.
And then I ended up,
if people aren't.
Yeah. And then I just immediately went over and I was the director of player development at BYU for a little bit.
I was just going to say, if people aren't familiar with the high school field at Kearns, probably, at least from what I've seen, one of the best high school fields anywhere.
Yes. And they're doing a lot of renovations there now where they're going to be updating technology to, track radar and, track spin rate of pitches and exit velocity of hits there. They're making it like a small college complex.
So is it fair to say that coaching is in your future?
Yeah, I would say that is a fair statement for sure.
Where's the next step for Drew Hill?
I want to be a pitching coach somewhere. I want to be the pitching coach. I went, got my first taste of it with the Marshalls, and we ended up, granted, not a lot of the time, but I mean, just because we were so good, but the competition that we played throughout that summer was not even close to the caliber of team we had. So we ended up going 76-4. And
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. And so I went straight from leading that whole group to BYU, where, as the director of player development, I was like the assistant pitching coach. But there's all these weird rules with the NCAA where like I couldn't really have that much contact with players. Like I couldn't like really like coach them. And so, and like my fiance, we were just engaged and she was accepted into her master's program down here in Texas. And so it just wasn't like, it didn't feel like the right time to, go on. I needed to come and make some money, but definitely going to be getting back into college coaching at some point.
We hope so. We'd like to see you in the dugout. Maybe you can start to create your own Darth Vader
mentality.
mentality. Yes,
have the Imperial March.
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. So we visited just a little bit, just exchanging text. You mentioned you have some stuff going on right now in the baseball world that you want to talk about.
Yeah, like I said, I've had a very unique experience playing. I've loved my time coaching. I had to take a step back just for a little bit, as my fiance gets through school and just working. But college coaching is in the future. In the meantime, I've wanted to stay in as well as I could and as much as I could. And so while I was here in Texas, I just created, I brainstormed this idea and created a website it's called drewsleague.com. And, you mentioned my mindset kind of like stood out to you when I was in high school. I'm passionate about having and helping other kids develop that type of an elite mindset where they don't have to succumb to the barriers that, their confidence level pushes them to. I want them to push their own self into, places that they never dreamed of being possible. But they need to have the structure and a proven system that gives them success so that they can practice developing an elite mindset just as they would practice going and, shooting a basketball and practice pitching, because mental performance is a lot the same. It's the same. It's a skill that is trainable, if I could just say that. Like, I like to think of it like this. If you're a shortstop and you go to practice, you're practicing drills to develop skills, which ultimately develop the skill set of a shortstop. If you're a pitcher, you're doing drills to develop the skills that go into the skill set of a really good pitcher. You can practice, drills. There are drills you can do to develop skills, the 10 pillars that I like to say, the 10 mental skills that create the 10 pillars of mental performance mastery. So I have this website, drewsleague.com, where people can send me emails, and I walk them through the 10 pillars of mental performance mastery that the number one sports psychologist, Brian Cain, ended up developing through his 20 plus years of experience. I'm bringing that to high school players everywhere. And college.
Oh, I love it.
That's awesome. I actually just pulled it up while we were talking right here.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
As much as we've, Benny's been coaching was coached for many, many years. And I coached back in the day with your Uncle Jared. We won a couple state championships in Gunnison. And when you're around high school kids, it's interesting to see, there's a lot of kids that have a lot of talent, but mental toughness is a whole nother thing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you see kids, and even just this year in the state tournament, the basketball state tournament, you saw some kids that just played out of their minds, and it was as if nobody was there. And then other ones that just couldn't quite do it. And it's always been fascinating to me how that mental toughness game works.
Yeah.
And so for what you're doing, I think there's a huge need and desire and want, not only for players, but for parents and for coaches to learn how to how to deal with this, because it's not only in the field or on the court, but when it transitions to real life, you're seeing this now. I mean, it's a dog eat dog world out there, and if you're not mentally tough, the world will break you.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of what I'm going for is the one-on-one Zoom calls that I would do with the mental performance training. Would allow me to do one-on-ones with people in Utah or Arizona or Texas, wherever I'm from. But I'm also doing team consulting, and how Brian would do this and how I watched him do it for 5 years when I was with him. He, these schools would have him on campus. He would, have really in-depth meetings and creating a culture and identifying really truly who your team is. Because if I was to go and ask, the South Sevier Rams, they're a really good player or a really good team right now. If I was to go and ask them all, like, what does it mean to be a South Sevier Ram? I would have probably a lot, 15 different, 15 different answers as to what that means. But I really love, and what I saw Brian do is he really focuses on what it means to create a culture and a championship culture within teams. And it's a unified answer that he's looking for. So at TCU, I'll give you an example. If you could go up to any player who's played at TCU from now to the last 20 years prior, and you said, what does it mean to be a TCU baseball player? They would all tell you the same thing. They live C. There's an acronym posted everywhere within our stadium, SEE, selfless excellence energy. And that's what we live every day at practice, every day at games. When we're out in the community, we're selfless. We put the team before ourselves. We're excellent in the way we prepare. And excellence in the small things is excellence in all things. So, like, you can't just be excellent at practice and expect games to go well. You can't just be excellent in practice and games or your life won't go well. So, waking up and having the first win of the day by making your bed and, having an AM routine that sets you up for success for the rest of your day, and, a PM routine that lets you shut down and get the proper rest and reset for the next day. All these things that are overlooked that are a true competitive advantage for elite competitors when you get, as high as TCU. And I want to show small town kids and small town teams what that looks like.
That's awesome.
You got me pumped just thinking about it, Drew.
The great thing about somebody like you, Drew, is that you understand that because you lived that, right?
Yeah.
Somebody says, "Hey, what do you know, Drew, about being a small town kid?" You're like, "Well, I grew up in Mayfield, Utah, and played for Gunnison Valley High School."
Yeah.
And those experiences you can't teach to somebody else because you lived them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you've been able to do, I'm excited about what you're creating, is I can see how this could just transfer over, whether you're a kid at a small school, a big school, you're a JC kid, you're a D1 kid looking to transfer something else. I can see how this would be so effective given your experience and what you've been able to do. And I love the culture thing. I've always been a big culture guy. And I love that about teams and coaches that can really instill that, and you can just sense what they do. And I know your grandpa Johnny and your uncle Jared are big Yankees fans, right?
Yeah.
You're probably a Yankees guy too.
Yes.
But I remember they would always talk about the Yankee way, right? You always do things a certain way because that's how you do them, and you take pride in doing that. And it's cool to hear you say that about TCU, that everybody has that same mantra and they know exactly what that is.
Yes, like something that you can lean on and something that coaches can hold their players accountable to. Because if you don't have a standard set, how do you keep your team accountable to it? If there's 17 different things and 17 different ways to be a South Sevier Ram, there should be one way, and that should be set by the players. I would love to go in, ask them, hey, give me a whole list of what it looks like to be the best South Sevier Ram. Last year, you guys won the state championship. Give me a whole bunch of words that describe that team. fill up a board and pick let them vote on 3 really like meaningful words to them that would like fit the team that year, and have that be like their mantra for the year. Things like that.
One thing I've thought a lot about, Drew, is I was your basketball coach for 4 years.
Yep.
And that's where I first witnessed the mental toughness of you, and honestly just the passion you play with. I mean, there's no one that plays harder than Drew Hill, and that even goes for basketball as well. I'm saying there's no bigger competitor, and for me too, my coaching journey, and this is a person I just want to talk to you just for a second, Drew.
Yeah.
My basketball coaching journey, I learned a lot over 10 years of coaching basketball, and did a lot of dumb things, probably said a lot of dumb things. But one thing that I learned through that whole process is there's a lot of stuff that we worry about in high school sports that really don't matter. They just don't impact kids and they don't impact games. But when you start talking about mental toughness and creating cultures, if I look back, if I was to ever coach again, the stuff you're talking about is something that I would tap into 100% more than I would offensive schemes, defensive schemes, all that kind of stuff. That stuff comes and goes.
Yeah.
But connection with people and teaching kids how to be mentally tough, those are more important than any of the other stuff.
Yeah. And what's exciting is if I was to tell you that resilience and confidence and focus and discipline are all trainable, like you would probably want to take advantage of those things. And that's why all these college programs and the teams in the NFL, MLB, the UFC people Brian works with, they pay him a pretty penny to like, I know at TCU, like get 50 grand to have him there for a year. At Texas A&M, 75 grand. He's on a thing with 150 grand at Arkansas football. Like people don't like make these kinds of investments unless they have a significant impact. And like that same program that he does with those schools, like I have, and I want to give to players at, that aren't ever going to make it to that level, but could definitely benefit from it still.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not only in high school, but like Andy said, once you get out of high school, I mean, you got to be a big boy. You got to go get after it.
Yeah. And you treat it, I at least have, you treat it as like a buffet. I have like the book and it's all there. And when you need it, you can refer back to it, even if you're not playing, like you say. But, going back to just the sports thing, everybody says that baseball or even sports in general are 90% mental and 10% physical, but they practice the mental side less than 10% of the time. And so if you can see, I mean, in sports, so many things are out of your control. And so what I found is a lot of players that are just immature and don't really know focus so much on the things that they can't control, like umpires' calls, referees' calls, who makes the lineup, where you're hitting, what position you're playing. All these things are out of your control. And if those are the things you're focusing on, you're doing yourself a disservice. Find the things that you can control and, direct all of your energy and focus into the things that you can control, so that the things that are outside of your control can have the best chance of rolling your way as well.
Love it. I'm pumped too. I'm excited for your journey. This has been really fun for me to hear some of the inside stories and insights of your journey. I don't know what else to say other than I was really excited for tonight.
Yeah, we're very happy for you, Drew. You're a fine young man, and you're a fine example of rural Utah and of our Gunnison Valley. So we appreciate the example you set to give kids. Like I said, people still to this day ask about Drew Hill. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because you're a super cool dude. It's the impact and the competitive nature and the athlete and the fine young man you've always been. So we thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That does mean a lot.
Anything else that we may have missed tonight that you wanted to talk about?
So we talked about the Drews League, and it's drewsleague.com. And I don't want people to get confused that it's just baseball. It's all sports. It's everybody that feels like they, can take their game to the next level, or they feel like they're missing out on something where, they're doing everything they can physically, but they're still not getting the results they want or deserve. Then this is the thing for you. Basketball, football, tennis, soccer, just life in general. Everybody can use some of these skills that are taught through the 10 pillars of mental performance mastery.
Excellent. We'll make sure we'll throw it up on our website too. Put it up on our social media. We'll share anything you got, send it our way. And we don't have a huge audience, but we'll certainly share it as much as we can, because we love the passion. We're passionate about this. That's why we do this, and we love it more than anything else when small town guys succeed. It's fun. It doesn't happen all the time, so when it does happen, it's fun to watch the journey.
Well, thank you so much. I love being able to share my experiences with other people too, and I don't care if 3 people or 2 people listen to this, but if something helped somebody, then that's a win.
Hey, when you getting married?
So that's going to be coming up soon, also in the summertime, hopefully. She's got 3 brothers in the military. My fiance, she's from Texas, and one brother of hers is back in the Middle East somewhere. The other one's in Japan, and another one's, I believe, in Georgia. So just getting everybody's schedules aligned, but we're looking to getting married in the summer.
Very good. Start another journey that you'll absolutely love. It's fantastic. Yeah. Being married, it's a challenge, just like anything else you go through. Kids are awesome, though. So we're excited for you to take that journey as well.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you joining us. It's been a fun evening. Again, we'll share this as much as we can. We'll put it up on our social media platform. We'll make sure we can get you all the information too for the podcast, so you can share it with all your baseball community and get it out there. That's the great thing about technology and social media now. It's so easy to share information everywhere.
Yes.
And with a couple tags and a couple likes here and there, man, things will take off fast. So maybe you throw it out to your TCU community out there and see what this can happen. It'll be exciting for us too.
Yeah, let's do it.
So again, we appreciate you coming on. So as we close tonight,
take us home.
For the former Gunnison Bulldog and former TCU Horn Dog Drew Hill.
Horn Frog.
Did I say Horn Dog?
Oh my God.
Horned Frog.
There we
Bingo.
go.
The Horn Frog. There we go. The former Horn Frog, Drew Hill. For the coach, Benny Hill, and for the 4th row, I'm Andy Hill. And we're out.
Dude, that's a fantastic close, Andy.
That's great. There you go. We get the claw right there.
I'm ready to share that on my social media right now.
Thank you for spending your time with the 4th Row. For more information, visit our website at fourthrowmedia.com or check us out on any of our social media channels.